My goal today is to make you say at least once, how the hell did I not know about this? And let me know in the comments later on how many of these tips you knew already. Okay, let's get right into it. The way your camera sounds can completely change the way your photos look. When you take a photo, are you hitting the shutter once, twice, or none at all? Activating the silent shutter is not only a matter of being discreet. It's all about how your camera operates, and it's gonna affect how your bokeh looks, the durability of the camera, and how it's going to respond in slow and super fast shutter speeds. A full mechanical shutter is when you hear it twice. It uses a physical curtain, and it's great against weird light effects and it's perfect for the bokeh. One sound only means you're using a mix of mechanical shutter and a E-front electronic shutter. It basically means that it starts electronically but then finishes mechanically. If you're a good pixel peeper, you're gonna notice the difference. And in some light situations, you might also. This takes us to the third option, which is the complete electronic shutter. It is completely silent, but it can cause bending on artificial lights, more rolling shutter, and it also affects the dynamic range of the camera. But no one's gonna hear you, which takes us to the next tip, which is audio signals. By default, you got this sound when you start a recording, stop it, or even when you focus. So if you're a very careful shooter that double checks everything, you don't need these. So you can just go into the menu audio setup and turn off the audio signals. But if you're like me and sometimes your double checking fails and you got maybe a 5 minutes recording of the floor instead of the scene that you should have recorded back there, then maybe the emphasized rec display can help you. This is basically adding this big red border around the camera screen just for you to be sure that it's recording right now. Now, talking about photo and video, I'm constantly going through one and the other. And one thing that is very annoying is having to change the settings all the time in between them to make everything look more or less the same. You can set the memory recall options, but you always have to remember to save them, and sometimes you just don't. So this setting here inside the menu, called different settings for still and movies, can be very helpful. You're basically gonna tell the camera what you wanna keep the same between photo and video, and what you want to keep independent. So usually stuff like exposure or white balance, for example, I just want to keep the same. But other things like the shutters and picture profile, I want to keep separately. This makes it for a much smoother workflow when working with both things at the same time. Now, talking about switching quickly, there are two shortcuts that you should know about. The first one is the like button down there that really helps the channel. And the second one is having a button set just for the APS-C crop mode. Some cameras are gonna offer this option that is super helpful for you to have a little bit of extra reach on your lens, and it also allows you to use an APS-C lens on a full frame body. Now, it does sacrifice a little bit of the sensor, but it improves also the rolling shutter, allows you to use those lenses, and in general makes the files overall lighter, which can be really helpful if you find yourself with only 50 shots remaining or 5 minutes of video and 2 hours more of a job to go. So this is how to survive on a small SD card. Some solutions require some sacrifices, others not that much. As I mentioned, crop mode can be one, because it allows on a camera like the A7IV, for example, to shoot 14 megapixel photos instead of 33. So basically now you have double the amount of photos you can take. Unfortunately, for video it doesn't change that much, because to make a 4K image you only need an 8 megapixel sensor, really. So for video you're gonna have to sacrifice on the resolution, bitrate or bit depth. Another hack can be if you have dual card slots, to instead of writing to both simultaneously, to make it continuous. So the camera is just going to finish one SD card and then continue writing on the other one. Now here obviously you're losing the redundancy, right? But you can compensate by connecting an app to your camera. If you're shooting photos, the Creators app can download all the photos you take, even in RAW. And if you're shooting video, you can download them using the Monitor and Control app. On both of them, if you connect your smartphone to the camera using a USB-C cable, it's gonna be much faster. Another way you can save a little bit more space, and that also you should have set correctly right from the start, is the quality of your RAW file. Now, when you come to this list here in the menu, it usually looks like the upper one is the bigger and better, and the lower one is the worst and smaller, right? But it's not exactly like that. Uncompressed is the real RAW file with everything in it. And then we enter the lossless compressed RAW files. The first one is the best compromises. It uses the complete full frame sensor and a compression that sacrifices no quality. Now, the more you go down, you are sacrificing actually the resolution. On the A7IV, for example, it means that here you're gonna shoot 14 megapixels and here you're gonna shoot 8 megapixel photos. So what is compressed? It is actually not sacrificing the resolution and not even that much on file size, but sacrificing a lot on bit depth, making your RAW file less flexible. So be sure to choose the one that suits you best. Now, some of the Sony cameras come with gyro data embedded into the files. This means super smooth stabilization with an extra step afterwards. In camera, you still have the active stabilization, standard, and those are really helpful also. But for the next level, you need the gyro data, a high shutter speed, and the Catalyst Browse app. Now you can walk, dance, and just make it analyze the movement and counter-compensate it. Now here's a quick way to have life-saving settings at the push of a button. You know, when you just don't have the time to set everything that you need on the camera and you just need to take one shot, this is when this Recall Custom Hold comes in handy. You're basically gonna set a button that you're gonna hold while you shoot, and it's going to activate specific settings that you're gonna define beforehand. For example, I like to have one in which the ISO and white balance are in automatic so that the exposure is roughly correct, and the shutter speed is quite high so that I'm sure that it's also gonna be very sharp. So it doesn't matter what you're doing right now, you just tap, hold it, shoot, that's it. You can add a wider focus point, deeper depth of field, you choose. You can also do it with the memory recall feature, but just remember that if you didn't save the current settings anywhere, when you come back, you won't find them there. Now in some events I just found myself with the wrong white balance just because of holding the camera pointing down in between shots, especially if it's something like grass or if the sun is hitting the floor close to you. So one way to be super practical using the auto-white balance but not suffering with this is the auto-white balance toggle lock. Basically you can assign any button on the camera to do it, let the auto-white balance do its thing and lock it in place. So now you don't need to figure out what's the correct temperature and the shift between magenta and green. The camera does it and you just lock it. Just remember to unlock it when you need it, but it's gonna be written. Small, but it's written. With all these great tips, you're gonna feel excited and you're gonna start shooting way too much. So to try to help you in the post-production, you can actually start rating your photos while in camera. I assigned one button during the playback to be able to rate the photos with 3 stars. In my rating system, it just means that that photo is gonna be kept. And when I send this file over to Lightroom, the 3 stars are also gonna be there, so it's very easy to filter and just deliver something very quickly, especially on those jobs that you need to deliver something right after the event. Now, 2 settings that you should take a look right now and that you'll never change again are the auto power off temperature and the gamma assist. The heat dissipation in the full frame cameras is pretty good, but without this setting, you're probably gonna encounter 1 or twice this dreaded icon with the high temperature and maybe even have the camera shutting down on you. So just to be sure, set this one to high so that it won't happen. And the other one applies especially if you're filming in HLG or any kind of S-Log picture profile. It's very difficult just with the histogram to be sure if your exposure is correct, the contrast is fine, so you can just leave the gamma assist in auto. It's going to recognize which kind of picture profile you're using, and it's going to correct that on camera for you. It is not baked into the file, it is just for you to view. Just makes your life much easier. And finally, a last tip to save the day, especially if you're filming in a place where you can't really control the lights, which is using the variable shutter. If your camera offers this, it means that instead of just jumping from 1/50 to 1/60 and then 1/80, you can actually go very precise with the shutter. When they are not video-oriented lights, they might have some variation, and then you're gonna see this flickering on the screen. Just go very slowly from 150 or 160 up and down and see where is the best point. Sometimes you're gonna find that it's 1/49.2, for example. And with experience, you're gonna notice how many of these you need right away or how many you can go inside the menu and then find it. So you can set any of the shortcuts that I mentioned to a custom button on the camera, to the FN menu, or even to one of the My Menu options. Depends on how fast you need access to any of these. Alright, let me know in the comments how many of these tips you knew already, and if you got one we didn't mention that could be valuable to other people watching this video. In the meantime, you can go check out these extra tips over here. These are videos in which I talk about specific apps for Sony cameras that can help you shoot photo, video remotely using your smartphone. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you over there.